and storyteller. His name is Davis Bates. He's going to be here at 12:30. So bring your grandkids, bring your neighbors. You know, you're welcome to join us. Refreshments will be provided by the Groveland Police Association. The performance at 12:30 will be courtesy of the Groveland Cultural Council. We received his performance via grant, and then there will be artwork and handcrafts on display all day as well. So drop in whenever you want. There'll be coffee, little light refreshments. So that's going to be happening all day on Thursday. It's supposed to be a beautiful day, so do come and do that. We have a program on Saturday in Tewksbury. It's a movie with a question and answer period that's going to be conducted by the director of the film, and it's called The Age of Love, and it's about dating among folks 70 and over. And that's going to be at the Tewksbury Council on Aging, and that's at 2 o'clock on Saturday. And we want to support their effort because it's kind of an interesting approach, and one that folks don't often want to discuss. So that's going to be happening. That's called The Age of Love, and then there's going to be that Q&A after with the director. And to let you know, this is the last men's breakfast of the season. Nisha's golf clapping quietly in the background. And we'll be back again in October, so keep an eye on your newsletter. We'll have speaker and refreshment information all available in the newsletter that you receive in July and August. So hang on to that. That'll also be in the September newsletter. So this will be the last of the season. If anybody has any questions or suggestions or information they'd like to share about the men's breakfast in any way we can make it better for you, just email me, lstanton@grovelandma.com, and we can try to oblige. So without further ado, John Osborne on Iceland.
Okay, the trip was taken in 2007. However, things haven't changed a lot in Iceland since that time, primarily because of the financial crisis that occurred in 2008. And as a result of that, essentially Iceland has been in lockdown, so to speak. They cannot exchange money and leave the country that easily because of the financial trouble they're in, which has created a lot of tension and unpleasantness. Okay, this is the first shot of arriving in Iceland. You can see this is the wing of the aeroplane, but you can see how volcanic it is. You can see here's a lava flow right here. Okay, if you follow my mouse arrow, you can see all of this is lava that's flown from a volcano. When you first arrive in the airport, you're surrounded by these lava fields. It's amazing. And so when you drive from the airport to Reykjavik, which is just slightly to the north, about something like 15 to 20 miles, all you see for certainly the first 10, 15 miles is just lava on both sides of the road. It is absolutely amazing. So I'm going to show you that in a few seconds if I can get organized. Okay, here is a shot off the side of the road showing you the lava. You can see there's a geothermal plant in the distance where they clearly, dig deep down into the lava to get to the mantle, and then they can get their hot water and drive their turbines and make electricity. So this is a shot showing you across towards the edge of Reykjavik, showing you notice the absence of trees. Very, very few trees in this place. When you're out into the countryside, it reminds me of northern Scotland. Northern Scotland is almost like a desert too, with very few trees. Okay. This is the shot going into Reykjavik. The road you can see is a fairly modern road. There are only 300,000 people in Reykjavik, and the total population of Iceland is about 600,000. So just about half of the population of Iceland are all in this one town, Reykjavik. And 300,000, as you could imagine, is not exactly a very large place, somewhat insignificant in comparison with other cities in the world. This is just a sign showing you Reykjavik inside. And this is the cathedral. The cathedral, and outside is one of these, inside, sorry, that's the inside of it. Nothing very special. Lutheran now. Originally was very Catholic in the 12th, the 13th century. Then, of course, once Luther comes on the scene around the 1500s, that's when Lutheran came into the country. This is a shot of one of the early settlers, and this is the Leif Erikson, which probably a lot of you have heard of, discovered Iceland, and this was put up with the date of him finding it. I've forgotten that, unfortunately. Anyway, the first settlers somewhere, we think, were Scottish monks who settled in Iceland around 700 AD. The first real settlers that we know today occur around 870. The first settler came in on his ship and went around the total island looking for the best harbor and found Reykjavik to be that best harbor, settled in there. And then by, that's about 870, by 930, large numbers of people had come into the island. The people who came in were Norsemen and their slaves. Their slaves were from Britain and Ireland. In other words, the Norsemen were taking over certain sections of Britain and also a certain section of Ireland, and they got slaves and took them over to Iceland. So it was an interesting arrangement. It's hard to imagine British as slaves.
Or Irish.
Sorry?
Or Irish.
Or Irish for that matter, yes. Okay, this is a shot across the water. This is obviously high summer. High summer in Iceland is kind of like the weather we've had this last few weeks. It's been, it doesn't get much more than 60. It's probably the best, operates between 50 and 55 and 60. When we were there, we had to have our coats on all the time. But it's not exactly the most stunning place to visit, in as much as the city or the town is not that exciting. However, the geology, which I'll show you a little later, is quite fascinating. Okay, so moving along. Again, this is another shot showing you. They do have trees, obviously where it's sheltered. But out in the plains, it's very barren. And there I am standing next to one of these houses, which is heavily insulated. It's sort of a metal outside skin on these houses, which surprised me. These are a couple of the other houses. These are not quite the metal ones, but you can see that this is very similar to Danish construction. And my wife, this is a shot of the Parliament building in Reykjavik. Rather, a little thing in comparison with, how can we say, Washington, or for that matter, London. And this is the downtown area of Reykjavik. This is it. This is the downtown area. Very village-like in its approach. This is a thermal plant in just outside of the town. Again, you can see each side has all this lava stuck through here, which has a certain layer of moss on it, which you'll see shortly. There's the moss lying on it. You see how it's sort of trying to establish itself and break some of this thing down. But it's a very, very unpleasant experience to try and walk across it. It's like walking over glass, rather unpleasant. There it is. Here, a little plant trying to establish itself on this horrible surface. This is the Blue Lagoon. Now, this is an interesting story. The Blue Lagoon is somewhere, you know, where you saw the original hydroelectric plant as it was driving down the highway. This is where the Blue Lagoon is. And the Blue Lagoon was established by a bunch of children, young actual bucks, young male bucks who were wandering over this area and found this beautiful warm water. And they would, it was a secret for a while because they weren't allowed to go charging across and jumping into this hot pool. But they did, and but the secret got out, and somebody said, wow, I think we can make something of this, and they did. And they established this warm pool for, this is it. Again, in the middle, notice in the middle of the lava field, here it is, in the center here. You go down here and into this area, and then enter into this pool, and this is the pool. It's amazing, iridescent blue pool. And there are a series of vents all the way around this area, which is hot water comes in. And in fact, I searched for the hottest vent, and I was told by one of the instructors, this is the hottest vent. And I went close to it, and boy, was it hot. I mean, it came out about 150 degrees or something like that, and it nearly scalded me. I went, wow, I got to get out of the way of this thing. The temperature of this pool is around 90 degrees all year round. Absolutely amazing. The nasty part is when you come out, there's a nice and beautiful cold wind. It's 45 degrees, and you freeze your buns off in the process. It's really unpleasant. Okay. There it is, the pool itself and the people in it. It's, as I say, it's a beautiful experience. However, the price at that time was exorbitant. We're talking, I mean, to give you an idea of prices in Iceland at the time, a hamburger and French fries was $40. Rather hard to swallow that, don't you think? Yeah. It did fall quite significantly in the next 2 years because that's when the financial crisis hit and the Iceland currency just plummeted. But at the time when I was there, they were still living high off the hog. In fact, it was so expensive, what Valerie and I did was we got food at a supermarket and we ate in our hotels, because in our hotel room. It was just too expensive to just, unless you were filthy rich. Being not filthy rich, we did that, and we got by using that. But it was not exactly the most pleasant experience. The food part was really difficult. Okay, here we are in the pool. It's absolutely gorgeous. This is one of these vents that I'm telling you about, and the water comes out underneath this thing here. And you can see the hot steam blowing out of it as a safety valve. Okay. All right, now we get back to the geology. Now we're moving north of Reykjavik, and this again, it shows you, I would say something like probably 80 to 90% of the island is covered like that. There's no trees, lots of lava, lots of hills. You might say, oh God, how boring. But it isn't. You'll see in a minute. Again, hydroelectric scheme in this, again the lava field in the front. Again, more lava, and more lava. In openings, they have a lot of greenhouses, rather like Spain. They have greenhouses in which they grow their vegetables. And of course, they're heated geothermally. Everything is heated geothermally. Houses, everything. So their electricity bills are extremely light because obviously electricity is cheap. And this is a shot. We were just going into a store, and at the corner of the store was this pile of rocks, and the warm air was coming up so that as you entered this store, this warm air would waft over you, you know, as you went through. So these little things were around all over the place, this geothermal energy availability. This is and these people get away from it all, so to speak, with their little shacks in the summer, and this is, I consider, the terrain of Scotland. Notice almost no trees, mostly shrubs, and you can see as far as the eye can see, just plain, no tree landscape. In the distance you can see some little hills, and mostly volcanic, believe it or not. That's my wife sitting in front of what is obviously a place that, you know, was originally exploded, gave a volcanic area, and then filled with water. And this is the Iceland flag. And this is looking across again, very, very similar to Scotland in its appearance. Now we're beginning to see there are lots of waterfalls as we move further east, because Reykjavik is on the west, and some rather beautiful sites of that. And these are volcanic mountains in the distance.
Are they still active volcanoes?
Some of them are, yes. In fact, as you know, Europe was impacted something like 4 or 5 years ago with that dust cloud that prevented airplanes flying in and out of from America to Europe. Yes, it's still active and is always a threat to air transportation. Okay, this is a shot that we took showing one of these major waterfalls. Now this water is extremely cold. If you ever fell in it, you'd die within about 5 minutes. Just bitterly cold. By the way, talking about waterfalls, you know, you often see in the movies people jumping over this waterfall and diving into the waterfall and coming up and swimming away. Don't believe it for a minute. The specific gravity of water in a base of a waterfall is about 0.8. So when you fall into a waterfall, you sink like a stone. Because you are 1 and the water is 0.8, you will sink to the bottom and you will never come up again. So I often see that in the movies and think, I wish they wouldn't show that because it just isn't true. Okay. Again, that's just my wife and I showing it. We were there. This I thought was a rather good shot. Amazing view there. You can see they do have some sunny days here occasionally, but it is a beautiful shot, I think. Okay, now we're entering an area where they have geysers. These are the geysers, and you can see this is the word geyser, by the way, comes from the first geyser they ever discovered, and was named geyser, which I think means hot blow or something like that in Icelandic. There it is. That's the name of one of these things. And you can see when they die down, they look like this. When they explode, of course, there's nothing to see, but that's what they look like. And they're intermittent, and they sometimes are continuous, but most of them are intermittent. Again, a rather pretty waterfall. Now, here is how Iceland formed. What you have is the Atlantic plate, which is on the left, and the European plate on the right. This fissure is around right through the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. Now, the Mid-Atlantic Ridge is only 50,000 years old. Namely, it's continually regenerating geologically. And so there's some argument as to when Iceland was formed. Most geologists think It was formed around 20 million years ago. There's some evidence that from iridium studies that it might have been as early as 65 million years ago. But because of the tremendous amount of volcanic activity, they can't find any rocks older than 16 million years ago. At any rate, these are some of the places, and what's happening is you will see that this is tearing apart. One part of it is sliding past the other. So you see, when you get into the middle of Iceland, you see this incredible ridge where the plate is tearing past each other. So I'm going to show you some shots of that. There it is. There's one of the plates, this here, and there's the other one. And they've got a pathway you can walk along it. I'll show you some more here. There's another one. At this location, we think that the first parliament was established about 930 AD, called the Althing. And the chieftains would come together, and they would have a sort of a court of dispute where they would discuss anything that's creating problems, and they would have a meeting of the chieftains, and they would essentially discuss and make parliamentary decisions, so to speak, on a vote. This again shows you how it tears the land apart. One part is sliding past the other. Notice in some places tearing it in many different ridges. And this is a place on this hill here. On the left is where they think that the Althing was first established. And this was the house that was produced in about 1844. They re-established the Althing. The Althing started in 930 and was finished about 1744. And then they re-established it about 1830. And that building is the 1830 commemoration of the Althing. Okay. And there it is. That's the commemoration building. And this, let me enlarge this if I can. Hang on a minute. Can I move this? I don't. Ah, yes, there you are. This is what they think that the original Althing looked like. These guys sitting around talking about the problems that they had in this town, this country of Iceland. Okay. Try to move. Oh, having trouble here moving on here. Ah, there you go. Again, you can see the tearing of this land is quite magnificent. I don't know what happened there. Why is it? Oh God. Where is she? Come over here and sort this one out, will you? It's moving over. It's not doing it. I'm trying to move on to the next one. No, it isn't. Ah, good girl. All right. Okay, let's look at this one here. If I can enlarge this, I'm not sure I can. I'm trying to. Oh God, doesn't. There you go. Look at that. This I thought was rather magnificent, showing this tear in the land. And that's the beautiful area of Iceland. Now the volcanic part is in the southeast, and it's continuously functioning. So Iceland is continually generating itself all the time by these volcanoes. See if I can learn from my tutor here. Here we go. This is a shot as I was leaving close to the airport, showing you the greenhouses and areas that are under irrigation. The airport's down in this corner here. You can see there's some oil tanks here. Oh, I don't know. It looks like that's it. Yeah, I think that's it. A couple of comments about Iceland and the financial crisis. It was very interesting. They had 3 banks. I went into one of them. It was in 2007, and there were 1 or 2 women working around the desk, and almost nobody, nothing was happening. No one was in the bank. It's amazing that all of a sudden these banks had created in huge numbers of assets, had bought up huge assets throughout the world, highly leveraged, and they were all essentially close to bankruptcy because they levered themselves so heavily. It's hard to realize that the guy, when they finally realized what had happened, and then there was a collapse, the British bank people and the Danish people had invested heavily in Iceland. And what happened was they lost all their money. After much debate in the European Parliament and whatever, they came to conclude, you put your money in, you took your chances, you're out of luck. So they lost their money, and a much serious issue. What happened was, the first Prime Minister who comes in is a gay, openly gay woman who is established, and she, in essence, turned the country around. Began to make the banks essentially had to re-establish themselves. They re-established one bank and managed to get the ship, so to speak, by selling a lot of these assets, managed to get the Iceland economy back again. But it's still, as they say, in tough shape, and as a result, approximately 2 years ago, they finally kicked her out because they couldn't keep taking the nasty medicine, but they're still taking it. It kind of reminds me of Greece, the same story. Okay, historically, Iceland is not terribly exciting. There was a major volcano in 1790 when essentially just about something like 20% of the people died. And the temperature, there was also the climatic conditions of Iceland in the 1300s was beautiful. But by the 1700s, the climate conditions deteriorated so much that many people essentially left Iceland and went to Manitoba in Canada. Lots of suffering in Iceland around the middle of the 17 and 1800s. It was run by, at one point, the Danes ran it from about, say, around these 1500s to around 1814. Became independent around then, with Danish recognition of the king as the sovereign, and finally became independent in World War I, after World War I. In World War II, it was supposedly neutral, but in essence, the British and the Americans moved in order to make sure that it was...
They stayed neutral.
It stayed neutral, exactly. Our neutral, if you know what I mean. Okay. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the terrain. I thought it was fascinating. But for most people, the climate is probably harsh. I certainly enjoy the warm temperature of 90 degrees in the Blue Lagoon. But as I say, it's not exactly everybody's cup of tea. But of all the places I've been in 30 countries. India's at the top of the list, and Iceland is second, believe it or not. I enjoyed Iceland immensely. Okay, well, thank you, gentlemen. That was it. Yes?
Along that fault, are there a lot of earthquakes? I mean,
No.
no?
No, it's very stable,
Oh.
interestingly enough. I'm surprised at that. Yes?
I heard that where it's a thermal underneath, they heat their houses and everything, they drill a hole into the ground, so
That's
they get
correct.
that thing, and it comes up and they heat their house and cook their food with that thermal energy underneath.
That's correct. They're on top of this mantle, that's right, which isn't too far below. And they can do that, yes, right. Yes?
You mentioned the Blue Lagoon. Are there other places around that are like hot springs where people
Oh.
go? And
No, but this is the only commercial one. There are, most of the water that's close to the surface is captured by the utility companies for thermal electricity. Anything else?
Yeah.
Yes?
How big is Iceland?
Oh, God, I don't know. I would say, that's a good question. I'm not sure.
Quite big, huh?
No, that's, you've got me stumped on that one. I'm not sure. I would say it's probably comparable to the size of Britain. It's not, but it's round, of course. It was called Iceland because they wanted to encourage people to settle there. Greenland, rather. They wanted to encourage them to settle there. But Iceland, hey, it's not a very pleasant place, especially in the northern part, which is over the Arctic Circle. The southern part, especially the western side, is warm. The eastern side is extremely cold. As we moved from west to east, it got colder. So Reykjavik is pretty good, and essentially, even in the wintertime, the temperature is about 30 degrees all the time. So that's the impact of the ocean. Most of their commercial activity has been with fishing. As I said, during this early period, in the middle period of the 1700s, their ability to feed themselves deteriorated. They couldn't grow barley, they couldn't grow wheat. They had serious trouble, so they had to find something to trade to the Europeans. So they traded fish. And so Iceland became a fishing economy until about 1950, when the British and the Irish British and the Icelanders got into what they call cod wars, and there was a really unpleasant period, because Iceland established their 200-mile limit that they wanted to make sure nobody competed with it for the fish, and that was objected to by the Brits, who said you can have your 12-mile limit and not your 200-mile. But they finally resolved it, I guess, in the European Court. I don't quite remember how they resolved it, but they did, about the 1970s. Okay, any other questions? No? Well, gentlemen, that's it.
Thank you, John.